My name is Rachel Torres. I'm 41 years old, a lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Army. And this morning, my sister-in-law handed me a boarding pass like it was a leftover coupon. We were standing outside Terminal 4 at JFK, surrounded by shiny suitcases, designer handbags, and the kind of manufactured family cheer that only shows up before holiday trips. She didn't say anything when she gave me the ticket, just raised an eyebrow, as if expecting gratitude. The seat was 37B, located in the middle of the economy section, right beside the rear lavatory. The kind of seat no one chooses, just accepts. My younger brother Derek, who stood behind her sipping a $9 airport coffee, laughed softly and held up his own ticket. First class, of course. Window seat, extra legroom, champagne before takeoff. Sorry, Rach, Derek said, not sounding sorry at all. Points didn't cover a third upgrade. But hey, it's a short flight. I smiled and said thank you. I've learned that silence disarms people far more than words. Inside, though, I felt that familiar tightness crawl across my chest. I wasn't surprised. Disappointed, maybe, but not surprised. I took my seat in the Uber we shared, the only one lifting my own bag into the trunk. My mother chatted with Derek about the new renovation at his condo in Austin. My dad, half listening, nodded and asked if the heated floors were finished. No one asked me about my last deployment. No one ever does. To them, I'm the one who never settled down, never had kids, never figured out what to do with her life. I've stopped trying to explain what I actually do. The clearances, the missions, the people I've led, those things mean nothing to them because they can't be photographed and posted on Instagram. Derek calls me low maintenance, which I know is code for invisible. His wife once asked if I ever got tired of doing nothing all day on base. I told her it depends on the battlefield. She thought I was being dramatic. At the terminal curb, Derek walked ahead with Mom, the two of them wheeling their matching aluminum luggage like a pair of catalog models. I followed behind with a duffel bag that's seen more dirt than carpet. My boots echoed against the tile floor. I could feel eyes on us. A neat, curated family trio up front, then me, the extra, the help. At the check-in counter, the agent scanned their first-class tickets with practiced efficiency, smiled, and offered them access to the Delta Sky Club. When it was my turn, she barely looked up, printed my economy boarding pass in silence, and motioned me aside. My family didn't wait. They had security lines to skip and cocktails to find. I stared down at the crumpled ticket in my hand. 37B, right beside the bathroom. The kind of seat that tells you exactly where you belong in their world. I folded it and slid it into my jacket pocket, then took a breath and followed. No one turned to see if I was behind them. It's always been that way. I'm not what they think I am. But today, the world has a funny way of correcting mistakes. Last Thanksgiving, I drove 4 hours after a 36-hour rotation, coordinating logistics for a massive joint exercise. I didn't change clothes. I barely had time to shower. I remember pulling up to my parents' house just as the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the lawn. The driveway was full. I parked 2 houses down and carried my bag by hand because I couldn't find a spot on the street. When I stepped through the front door, the smell of cinnamon and burnt sugar hit me like a memory I no longer belonged to. My mom gave me a quick side hug while mixing something in a bowl. She didn't look up. My dad gave a small wave from his recliner without putting down the remote. That was it. Meanwhile, Derek stood in the kitchen like a golden statue, surrounded by laughter. His wife, Marissa, was bragging about her new Pilates studio, and everyone hung on every word. She showed them pictures of the space, the branding, and the smoothie bar. When I offered to help, my mom handed me a trash bag and said the bin out back was full. I didn't argue. I took it and walked past Derek, who grinned and said, "Hope they feed you better at the base." "You look tired." Everyone chuckled as if he had just won the roast of the year. I smiled, the kind that hides more than it shows, and took out the trash. It was cold outside. I stood there for a second, breathing it in, letting the air sting a little. It reminded me that I was still real. Back inside, my place at the dinner table had been set at the folding card table in the corner. They used to call it the kids' table, but the kids had grown up and moved away. The table stayed. I sat next to the sliding door, and the draft from the glass made my knees ache, an old injury from a jump landing that went sideways. Derek made a toast. Something about gratitude and growth. Everyone clinked glasses. I didn't have one. Apparently, there weren't enough wine stems to go around. My plate looked smaller, too, like it had come from the mismatched set kept under the sink. No one asked me how I'd been. No one mentioned the Legion of Merit medal I received last fall. Instead, Marissa leaned across the table and asked if I'd thought about switching careers. I mean, the military's great and all, but don't you want to do something more? To you? Something softer? She meant well. They always do. After dinner, I scraped plates into the trash and washed dishes, while Derek showed off a video of his Tesla on a test track. My mom said I was always helpful, like it was a compliment, or maybe a label she had chosen for me years ago and never let go of. When dessert came out, there was one slice of pumpkin pie left. They saved it for Marissa, who was still on a phone call in the foyer. I got the last piece of pecan, which tasted like freezer burn and old sugar. I chewed in silence and watched them laugh about something I hadn't heard. I realized then that I could have vanished from the room and no one would notice. I was a shadow in a house that once had my height marked in pencil on the pantry door. It didn't break me. Not yet. But it did start to feel like the air was thinner when I was around them. Like there wasn't enough space for me to breathe and still be seen. My apartment sits on the third floor of a secured complex just outside Fort Meade. It's not large, but everything in it has a purpose. Clean lines, soft lights, and the faint hum of a surveillance system that never sleeps. The door locks with a biometric scanner. Inside, it smells like cedar and something close to calm. The air is always still. My desk faces a large window that overlooks a narrow stretch of pine trees. On the wall beside it, there's a single framed photo of my unit in Syria. We're all covered in dirt, exhausted, holding rifles, and smiling like we had won something bigger than a war. No one from my family has ever been here. They don't even know the building exists. I once mentioned the name of the city, and my mother said, "Isn't that kind of far?" I told her it wasn't. She changed the subject. The kitchen is spotless. The knives are sharpened and hung in perfect alignment. My coffee maker is military issued, older than most college students, but it still works better than anything you'll find in a store. I keep things simple. There's comfort in order. In the corner, I have a small couch that I bought with my first re-enlistment bonus. It's gray, firm, barely used. Most nights, I sit there with a book, or sometimes nothing at all. Just the quiet. I used to turn on the TV for background noise, but now I've grown to like the silence. There are no photos of my family on the shelves. Not out of bitterness, just truth. They wouldn't recognize this space as mine. It doesn't match the version of me they've decided to believe in. They picture me in a shared apartment, maybe one with peeling paint or secondhand furniture. They picture struggle because it makes their condescension feel generous. It helps them sleep. But here, in this space they'll never visit, I am at ease. This is mine. Built from years of long nights, dust storms, midnight calls, and decisions I can't always talk about. It's not much to look at, but it holds me up when nothing else does. At the foot of my bed, there's a narrow locker with reinforced edges and a hidden lock beneath the handle. I open it slowly, like I always do, as if I'm visiting something sacred. Inside, my dress blues are folded so precisely they look untouched. The jacket is deep navy, with silver insignia that catch light in quiet ways. Each badge is earned, not given. There's one from a combat action badge, another from a medical evac in Kandahar, and the small, almost unnoticed one from the Defense Intelligence Agency task force that changed everything. There's a faint scuff across the left shoulder, where shrapnel once tore through the air a little too close. My name is stitched in thread just above the heart. Torres. I've never told my family about any of this. Not because I'm ashamed, because they never really asked. When they picture my job, they think of clipboards and office chairs. They imagine something safe, boring, harmless. They need it to be that way, because anything more would force them to see me differently, and that might make their indifference harder to justify. So I let them think what they want. It was easier. But in this room, with this uniform in my hands, I remember who I am. The security line at JFK curved like a snake around the terminal. It was chaos. The morning rush. Derek walked ahead, animated, laughing at something Marissa said. She wore sunglasses indoors and carried nothing but her phone, swiping through it like the world owed her attention. I followed behind, dragging my suitcase and carrying their overflow items. Marissa's yoga mat, Derek's coat. They never looked back. Not once. I don't even think they noticed I had taken their things off the conveyor at the curb. "Hurry up, Rachel," Derek called over his shoulder. "We want to hit the lounge before we board." The TSA agent checked their first-class tickets and waved them into the TSA pre-check lane, the fast lane. When I stepped up, the agent looked at my economy ticket. "Standard lane, ma'am," he said, pointing to the long, winding line of tired travelers. To the left. Derek turned back. He saw me being directed away. He shrugged. "We'll see you at the gate," he shouted. "Don't get lost." He and Marissa disappeared into the fast lane. I stood there, holding their extra coats, and joined the back of the line. I checked my watch. 0800 hours. Suddenly, my phone buzzed. It wasn't a text vibration. It was a rhythmic pulse against my hip. 3 long, 3 short. My stomach dropped. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my personal phone. It was blank. Then I reached into my inside jacket pocket and pulled out my government-secure phone. The screen was flashing red. Critical alert, code red. Threat level, imminent. Authority, Joint Chiefs of Staff. Asset recovery. Torres, Rachel, LTC. I stared at the screen. Code red meant a national crisis, a direct attack, or an imminent threat to the homeland. And asset recovery meant they weren't just notifying me. They were coming for me. I looked up. The security checkpoint was a bottleneck of hundreds of people taking off their shoes and belts. There was no way through. My phone buzzed again. GPS tracking active. Extraction team inbound. Then, the chaos started. The glass doors at the far end of the terminal, the ones marked emergency authorized personnel, only burst open. A team of 6 men in heavy tactical gear sprinted into the terminal. They weren't TSA. They were Port Authority Emergency Service Unit, ESU, heavily armed with M4 carbines and ballistic vests. Behind them were 2 men in dark suits, earpieces, Secret Service. The crowd screamed. People dropped their bags. Everyone thought it was a shooter. "Make a hole!" the lead officer screamed. "Clear the lane! Now, now, now!" The police formed a wedge, shoving people aside, cutting straight through the security line. I stood still. I knew they weren't shooters. They were my ride. Derek and Marissa were just coming out of the pre-check screening. They froze, terrified. "Oh my God!" Marissa screamed, grabbing Derek. "It's a raid!" End quote. Derek looked back, saw the armed men sprinting toward the checkpoint, and ducked behind a metal pillar. "Rachel, get down!" he yelled at me. He thought I was in the crossfire. The tactical team vaulted the barrier. They ignored the screaming passengers. They ignored the TSA agents shouting for order. They ran straight for me. The lead officer stopped 2 feet from my face. He was breathing hard. He looked at my face, verified it against a photo on his wrist monitor. He snapped his heels together. "Colonel Torres!" he shouted over the panic of the crowd. I nodded calmly. "Ma'am, we have a code red situation. the officer said, his voice urgent. The White House has authorized immediate priority extraction. We have a bird waiting on the tarmac. The two men in suits stepped forward. One of them took the duffel bag from my hand, the heavy one Derek had made me carry. Allow me, Colonel, the agent said. We need to move, ma'am, the lead officer said. We are clearing a path. I looked over at the pre-check lane. Derek was peeking out from behind the pillar. His face was as white as a sheet. Marissa was trembling, clutching her purse. They were staring at me. They saw the SWAT team surrounding me. They saw the Secret Service agent holding my bag. They saw the police captain waiting for my order. Derek's mouth opened, but no sound came out. He looked at the sister he had just told to not get lost. The sister is carrying an economy ticket, and he saw a colonel. I didn't smile. I didn't wave. I just looked at him. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the crumpled boarding pass. Seat 37B. I let it drop. It fluttered to the floor, landing on the dirty tile. Lead the way, Captain, I said to the officer. Yes, ma'am. Move. Move. I yelled. The police aggressively pushed the crowd back, creating a wide corridor straight through the metal detectors. They didn't ask me to take off my shoes. They didn't scan my bag. They escorted me right through the checkpoint. As I walked past Derek, he stood up slowly, stunned into silence. Rachel? He whispered. I didn't stop. I kept my eyes forward. I have work to do, I said as I passed him. The tactical team formed a protective diamond around me. We marched through the terminal, bypassing the gates, heading straight for the secure access doors that led to the runway. Passengers were filming with their phones. The terminal was silent, except for the heavy thud of boots and the crackle of police radios. Package is secure, the agent said into his wrist mic. We are moving to the tarmac. A TSA manager tried to stop us. Hey! You can't take a civilian out there. The Secret Service agent flashed a badge and didn't even slow down. National security, stand down or be detained. The manager stepped back, terrified. We reached the emergency exit. The officer kicked the bar, and the door swung open. The blast of jet fuel and noise hit me. Waiting right there on the tarmac, engines screaming, was not a Delta flight. It was a U.S. Air Force C-37A, Gulfstream V, with official government markings. A black SUV with flashing lights was parked next to its stairs. A crew chief in a flight suit was waiting at the bottom of the stairs. He saluted as I approached. Colonel Torres, he said. Welcome aboard. We're cleared for immediate takeoff to Andrews. I returned the salute. I walked up the stairs. I turned back one last time to look at the terminal window. Pressed against the glass, I could see them. Derek and Marissa. They were watching. They looked small from up here. I stepped inside the jet. The door sealed shut with a heavy thud, locking out the noise, the family, and the economy seat. The interior was leather and wood. A steward waited with a glass of water and a secure tablet. The chairman is on the line, Colonel, the steward said. I took the tablet. This is Colonel Torres, I said. I'm secure. The jet taxied hard, cutting in front of a line of commercial airliners waiting to take off. We didn't wait. We had priority. As the engines roared and pushed me back into the plush leather seat, I looked out the window. I saw the Delta plane that your family would be taking. It was still sitting at the gate, delayed. I closed my eyes. For years, I had carried their bags. I had taken the bad seat. I had let them treat me like a footnote in their perfect lives. But when the world actually mattered, when the call came, I was the one they sent a jet for. My phone buzzed in my pocket, my personal one. I pulled it out. A text from Derek. Rachel, who are you? I stared at the screen. I didn't reply. I turned the phone off. I looked at the classified briefing on the tablet in front of me. Maps. Threat assessments. Real stakes. I didn't need to tell him who I was. I knew. And the United States government knew. And that was enough. I took a sip of water. The jet banked sharply, climbing toward the stratosphere, leaving the heavy air of expectation far below. I was finally flying first class. On my terms.